All right. Well, we're going to switch to our next guest here. We have a legend in the sport. Absolutely. We've got Jeff Browning here. How you doing this morning, Jeff?
Good. How are you?
Doing great.
Awesome.
Yeah. How are you holding up with everything that's going on in the world?
We're doing well. I mean, Montana hasn't had that many cases, and so we've never shut down national forest or trailheads. So I've been able to train outside most of the time. I mean, we still have some gnarly weather, so I do use my treadmill on those days. But for the most part, we've had an earlier spring this year, luckily, and so I've been able to get out and train in the mountains quite a bit. So that's kept me sane. You know, we homeschool and I work out of the house, so not a lot of change there on our personal front as far as a family. But I do live in a house that with 3 kids and 2 teenagers out of that. So there's some rowdiness in our house, and my wife usually with built-in babysitters get out of the house a lot and go out for drinks and social coffee dates, and that's been hard not having that. And we just started opening back up.
Oh, we got a quick progress update here. We'll get right back to you.
Yep, cool.
So we've got 25 miles in 2 hours, 58 minutes. So if we do the math on that, looks like he's on pace under that 12-hour mark if he kept that up for the rest of the time. I know he's had a couple bathroom breaks in this first 25 miles. So that's gonna, if he kind of stays on the treadmill and has that out of the way, he should make up some time later on, hopefully. So yeah, that's kind of our update. And then here is a pace chart, and this is showing some of his data coming in. So not only his pacing, but also his heart rate. And you can see that Dave Proctor treadmill average pace line straight across there. So he's well below that. And then that's his actual data from his world record on the track, 11 hours, 19 minutes. You can see kind of his pacing up and down right there. It's kind of cool to have some of those stats to look at. So yeah, Jeff, you are a very accomplished 100-mile runner yourself. I know you're also, do you coach as well?
I do.
You
Yes.
coach, and I know I really want to talk to you about some of the high-fat, low-carb diet stuff. I know you are a proponent of that, and that's also something that Zach follows. But yeah, maybe just give the viewers a little bit of an idea about yourself, if you want to talk a little bit about your background. Just for a minute.
Yeah, let's see. I've been doing, this is my 20th season racing ultras. So I've been doing it for 2 decades and racing pretty hard for 15 or 16 years of that. And especially the last 5 or 6 years, I've been hitting 100 milers really hard. Since 2014, I've been doing 3 to 5 hundreds a year, every year. And so I'm well aware of the pain that's involved with going 100 miles. I've done 3900s. I lost count years ago at 120 ultra marathon finishes. I have no idea how many I've done actually. I just keep track of hundreds now. And yeah, so as far as, you know, I made a big shift in, Zach and I've been friends for a long time, and sponsored by Ultra for a long time as well. And when I made the shift into December 2015 to a high fat, low carb diet, I got hold of, Zach was the first person I called, and we traded notes. We had hung out and run together at Outdoor Retailer in Salt Lake City years and years ago. And he had kind of put the bug in my ear about that diet. And I was already searching, you know, I was kind of into nutrition, and I've tried everything. I've been a vegetarian. I've been whole foods organic diet where I went crazy and soaked everything, soaked my beans and soaked my grains, and you know, did sprouted grains, and really, you know, did strict organic and clean meat and all that kind of stuff after being a vegetarian. And then shifted in 2015, like I said, and Zach was the first person I reached out to, and we talked about performance. We talked about how to do it. And that's kind of how I got kicked off in this, with his help. And so, yeah, Zach was part of the FASTER study that Dr. Jeff Volek did at the University of Connecticut. He was at Connecticut at the time. I think he's now at Ohio State, maybe. But anyway, he was part of that FAT cohort that looked at fat adaptation and how many grams a minute you're burning and at what VO2 max. And kind of like in our camp, that's our gold standard study that we refer to, because it's one of the only studies we have. It's a great study, and it's been peer reviewed, and it's definitely only thing we have reference to. So one of the things I think that's cool about this is by manipulating your lifestyle diet, allows you to burn fat at a higher rate per minute. So getting those grams a minute up over 1 gram a minute, I can't recall what Zach burns per minute, how many grams a minute, but he, I've been tested in a couple of different lab settings at altitude and at sea level, at GU Energy Labs, and also at USU, Utah State, in their metabolic lab. And both cases, I was about 1.3 grams a minute is what I burn onboard fat. So that's a high rate, which is really good as a 100-mile runner. You want to burn as much fat as possible. That means you need less calories per hour from simple carbohydrate. That means less GI stress. And you don't have to be pushing, 250 to 300 calories an hour, which causes, you can't absorb all that typically. You can try to train your gut to handle that. And that's what I did till 2000, for 15 years of ultra running. I was on a high carb diet and a kind of typical endurance athlete diet. And, 50-60% macros were carbohydrate. And I had to take a ton of gels and a ton of calories per hour to not bonk. And once I did the shift, I really saw huge benefits in not only daily energy, but also during a race, like 0 bathroom breaks besides peeing, during a 100-miler, which is huge. If you're running 100 miles and you don't have to jump in the woods, that's a pretty big benefit, to be able to go that far. And then also, and I'd never experienced that before. There always was some form of GI stress, even though I would consider myself to have a pretty iron gut, as a high carb athlete at the time. I could down 70 gels during a race. And, so anyway, like, I think there's lots of benefits to it. And I also have seen a lot of masters athletes that I coach really have good benefit as well. So,
it sounds like
I don't know if you guys can hear it, but I've got a cat at the door who wants into the room I'm in.
So it sounds like, but you're still using still carbohydrates on race day.
Absolutely. And that's one thing I would say is kind of the approach here is you're using, looks like we got a bathroom break. You're using simple carbohydrates. I just use less per hour than I used to. So it's really simple. I used to do close to 260 to 300 calories, sometimes even 400 plus an hour at times. I felt like I needed that much, or I just was losing energy. And now I can go on about 200 calories an hour in a race. So I'm not bonking anymore. Like I haven't had a bonk. I have to say, I haven't had a bonk since I made the shift. So for the last 4.5 years, and a lot of races, I've run I've done 22, I've done 3,900. So I did 22 as a high carb athlete. So whatever that is, 8, 9, 1,700s, no bonks. So, which is really what you need. You need to be able to have consistent energy through a whole race. And if there's been times back when I was a high carb athlete that one of the things you run into is if you have a 20-minute bonk or a say 3 or 4 mile bonk, right? 20, 30 minutes. You're going to lose 20 to 30 minutes on the pack that's in front of you if you're racing, right? So one of the things, for example, is, one of my last big races was at Run Rabbit Run. And I recall Carl Meltzer and I were running together, and we were in like kind of a chase pack of the lead group. And we were probably 30 plus 40 miles in, right when you're getting tapped out in the race. And I just remember, like, that was back before the fat adaptation stuff. And I had a bonk and I lost contact with Carl and I never gained it back. We stayed 20 minutes apart the rest of the race. And I illustrate that to show that one bonk cost me a decent amount of cash, for one thing, because we were the 2 masters runners. So you get $1,000 bonus for being a 40 plus, right? So at the time we were the 2 top masters runners, and we ended up going second and third in that race that year. But if I wouldn't have had the bonk, I would have been in contact with Carl the whole race. And we stayed at that 20 minutes the rest of the race. We both ran solid races the rest of the race, but that one bonk cost me, and it cost me well over $1,000. So, those kind of things, like, that's some of the benefits I see in it is less GI stress. Also recovery is really good on this too. And what that mechanism is, I don't know. There's been all kinds of theories thrown out. But definitely I see it across the board with my athletes that have a lot of ultra running experience that make the shift that I coach. I see that is one of the things, and that's one of the things Zach told me in my first race under this nutritional angle was Hurt 100 in 2016. And I didn't know what to expect. And he shot me an email right before the race, and he said, "Get ready for the recovery. It'll blow your mind." And I was like, yeah, whatever. Okay. I just went and ran the race, totally not sure what to expect. Ended up winning the race, running really fast, having a great race. And afterwards, so I had, like I said, I had 2200s to compare this to, right? If you look at my N=1 experiment, I had massive swelling in my, like, ankles, knees, always. And I just chalked it up to 100 milers. That's kind of, it's 100 miles and it damages you a little bit. But what I realized was it actually was, my diet was contributing to the inflammation. Whether that was the how many gels I was taking during the race, like just so I hadn't have so much not to bonk, or a combination of what I ate post race. I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to throw out theories of why. I'm just going to say my experience showed that it was a game changer in the recovery department post 100. I had a good comparison group of 2200s to compare it to, and they were very consistent in how I was. I was cloudy for a week, brain wise. I had brain fog. I was kind of swollen in the face. My wife always said she hated that I did hundreds, and that was my main distance because I looked so hammered afterwards. She was always worried what I was doing to myself. But she wasn't on that trip, and I was texting her photos of my ankles, my knees. I was like, wow, I don't even have to wear compression. Like, look at this. Like, I'm in flip-flops. I can do air squats 72 hours after the race, and I'm hardly sore. I remember doing, on the way to the awards with Yassine Daboon and Gary Robbins, and they were both kind of hobbling. And this was my first race on this new way, right? And I remember just being so stoked because we'd gone to a little pre-party thing before the award ceremony. It's at a country club, and their place was right down the street, so we were able to walk to it. So we were walking, and they were all kind of hobbling, and I was just like, "Whoa, you guys! I'm freaking out!" Like I was doing burpees and in the street, and and that was on Monday, and I got done running Saturday night. So or Saturday or Sunday morning. So
we got a quick check-in.
All right, we've got that QR code up again for you. Take a snapshot of that to donate directly to Fight for the Forgotten. We've got that $10,000 match going on all day today while Zach is running. So you've got a couple more hours, but it's always easier to get that in sooner than later. Congrats to some of our winners. We've got another Ultra $100 online voucher. reach out to us on social media and we will get you that voucher. The second one we have up is another product pack from SFuels. Reach out to us on social media and we will get that sent out to you right away as well. I know, Jeff, maybe something that you want to look at too is trying out the SFuels for your low carb needs. But really interesting information on there. So love hearing everybody's stories on that. We do have Michelle as our spotlight athlete for this block. She is actually another low carb athlete. She does triathlons. She's done finished Ironman 8 times, has qualified for Kona twice. Sadly is not going to be able to compete in Kona this year, as we've just found out Kona has been pushed to February, I believe, of next year as of right now. But she's still getting after it and out doing some training with Zach today.
Yeah.
How are you?
Good. It's early morning here in Hawaii.
Yeah.
It's 7 o'clock.
It looks a lot warmer there than it is here.
Oh, yeah. No, yeah, it's kind of nice. The temperature's great. So this
Yeah.
is fun. Thank you.
Yeah. What are you doing for your workout today with Zach?
I'm on my kicker. So I'm just spinning away for a while and, joining the group. Excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, I hope you have a great workout. Thanks for joining us today and keep rocking it, lady.
Thank you.
All right, bye. Thank you, guys.
All right, cool. Thanks for that check-in. Yeah, so we were just chatting here with Jeff about some of his experiences. Yeah, I'm not on the low carb diet as of now. I know my brother has been experimenting with some of that quite a bit. But I wanted to ask you a little bit because I saw this story and I was like, there's no way this is going to happen. But Michael McKnight just ran 100 miles on no calories, just some little bit of like electrolytes and salts and water. And I believe you were you involved in that in any way? Tell us a little bit about that. Yeah.
Yeah, Mike came to me. I coached Mike. I coached him through the Triple Crown win last year. And I've coached him for a couple years now. And he came to me when all the lockdown stuff happened, and he was like, dude, my races the stuff I was going to do is getting canceled. He's like, I want to do something. And he had heard, I had coached an athlete a few years ago at Across the Years. Mikey Sklar had attempted a 100-mile fasted or 100-mile no calorie run. And he was trying to do it in 24 hours. And he made it 75 miles in 24 hours. But he had his muscles kind of seized up, at the end at about 75 miles. And he and I had traded, because I'd coached him, we traded notes a lot and talked about it. But then Mike came to me this spring and was like, hey, I want to attempt this. And I was like, no, man, I don't think it's a good idea. But he was adamant. And he said, Jeff, I really want your blessing. And I was like, well, I'm not going to give you my blessing. But if you're going to do it as your friend and coach, I will help you. And so he decided that, like, I said, if you're going to push through it, I will help you. So, so it was his decision. I wanted it to be his decision. And, but what we did was basically put together a strategy. Maybe he was already training for a last person standing event. So he had been training, volume for 100 miles, no problem already. So all we did was fine tune a few things to get him ready for that and some strategy around it. I reached out to Mikey in Seattle and kind of picked his brain on some specifics of what he kind of experienced, some of his mistakes he felt like he made. And then we kind of incorporated that strategy into Mike's attempt. And, Mike what we ended up doing is one thing we didn't think about up front that we changed about 2 weeks out was he was using an electrolyte pill. And we decided he ordered bulk supplements so he wouldn't have the capsule, because the capsule has a little bit of calories in it.
Purist.
The gel cap. So we had to like, it has a few calories, not very many, but still it wouldn't be 0 calories.
Nice.
So we got bulk potassium citrate, bulk magnesium citrate, and Redmond sea salt.
Okay.
And he put them in separate Ziploc bags, lick his fingers, stick it in the bag, put it in his mouth, and then wash it down with water. So he just had water on him.
So you said you wouldn't advise. I mean, is this something like that is ill-advised to attempt? I mean,
well,
like,
here I would say this. I think Mike did it because he wanted to see if it was possible. On paper, it's possible, right? When we do the math, especially if you can burn at least about 1 gram a minute from fat.
well, because you have plenty in your body that's stored up, right? So like the calculation is there, but also I'm sure it's not optimal, like optimal for performance. Like if you
it's not optimal, and that's why you use carbohydrate during racing. Like it's appropriate, and
Sure.
Mike still uses carbohydrate during races. He definitely IV drips calories through the whole simple carbohydrate through the whole thing. Right. And so do I. And so does Zach, right? With SFuels, right? He's using SFuels. So like we do use them. We just don't use as much per hour because we're getting a percentage of our caloric needs from onboard fat. But what he wanted to do was, can he keep a consistent pace, consistent fat burning zone? So he's never going into that like hard zone, right? Like we compared to Zach right now. Zach's accumulating into that hard zone, right? He's at like a high end heart rate, right? He's been what, average like in the upper 140s right now or something for this attempt. So, Mike was backing off, letting his heart rate be lower, and he was just trying to stay a consistent pace. What he found for him, he just went by feel. He didn't even like worry about where his heart rate was necessarily during the run. He just tried to go by feel and see where the cards fell. And we didn't know if he was going to have to bail at 75 miles and this be walking and couldn't continue. And I thought he might be able to go sub 24. I was really surprised he was able to go sub 20. He ended up going 18:37. It's at 4,700 feet. So in Cache Valley, Utah, where he lives. I used to live there. So he picked up kind of a 70% road route, kind of a rolly flat route. The valley's pretty flat. And then there's some hills up to the Bear River Range. It's where Bear 100 starts, is Logan, Utah.
Yeah.
And he lives just north of Logan in a smaller town. And so he kind of just did a big loop through the valley. And, he had a tracker on and the whole time. And I was just like, towards the end, I was like, oh my gosh, he is like not slowing down. And he said he could have continued. He could have kept going. He did tell me he ran across like mile 80 or something. He was going down this highway in the middle of the valley. And he said someone had thrown out a bag of cheap marshmallows and they had exploded all over the side of the road. And he said he thought about picking one of those up and eating one. He was like, man, I could totally eat one of those and I wouldn't even think twice about it. So anyway.
Oh, looks like we got a progress update here of Zach. So he's at 28 miles in 3 hours, 20 minutes, and looks like he's still trending right in the middle of those 2 record paces. So still on track for the treadmill world record set back in 2019. And yeah, here, as Jeff was just saying, you can see his heart rate and his last mile was 6:51. So he's cruising. It looks like, I've been watching him. He's been back at it. He had a quick little minute restroom break. But yeah, what do you think, Jeff? Looks like he's been moving pretty well since then still. But yeah,
he's moving solid. And, Zach, knowing Zach too, he'll be pretty consistent through this thing. Obviously he's proven that he can run fast for 100 miles, especially on a flat 100 miler. So he's definitely well proven in that department. So he's had a lot of attempts at that world record when he was doing it on the track. So I think it was his 6th attempt before he got the world record. So, I think he has a really, really good shot. The hardest part is just the fact that he has to like jump off the treadmill to use restroom.
Right. Yeah. You can't just take a quick side break.
Well, one of the
Especially
things that we
when-
run into when you're fat burning at a higher rate, you use a little more water. So you actually are flushing, you're processing through, and you have to pee more. So there is that con of a higher fat burning rate means you're using more water. So, that makes electrolytes and water hydration an important piece of the equation. Like we were talking with Mike McKnight, and that was one thing we talked about. Your Achilles heel is dehydration and electrolyte imbalance. So you have to be able to maintain that to be able to attempt 100 miles with no calories. But we'll see if anyone else attempts it. I think it's cool that we've been talking about for years in endurance coaching that it's possible, on the math's there. And people argue that it could be done by a high carb athlete too. I personally would like to see that attempt just to compare it.
See
right?
the meltdown.
See if
Like
there's
if
a
I went out
meltdown
there-
or they can do it.
Yeah.
We'll see. But I think it's really cool that a fat adapted athlete, did it first.
Yeah,
it's
I
no longer theory.
All of us are, as ultra runners, we like to see what our limits are and see what we can push. And I think,
Yes.
yeah, like I saw that, and I was like, oh, that's a bad idea. And I honestly didn't think it was possible. So it's pretty cool to see. I was impressed. And my brother was pointing out though, how I think, there's been examples of really good performances on really low calories, like shockingly low. So, even Diana Finkel, I think the year she was in the lead of Hard Rock, even up towards the end before I think she had to drop out, she was like smashing it and had consumed almost nothing, was like one of the big stories of that year. I don't know if you remember that, but.
And I would say, be careful out there. Like, do your homework. If anybody's going to attempt it, like, have safety net in place. Mike had people, supporting him through that, so he could bail if he needed to, or if he got in trouble. So have a backup plan too. So you're not just like out in the middle of somewhere remote valley by yourself if things melt down, or whatever you're doing. And if we look at the history of ultra running, I think you bring up a really good point. Is people like when Gordy Ainsley ran 100, Western States for the first time during the horse race, people thought it wasn't possible, and he was insane that he could do it in sub 24, and he did it, right? And so, like, that's what our sport's about, is pushing limits and seeing what's possible. It's what Zach's doing right now, right? He has a world record under his belt. He's going for another world record. Like, it's cool that we can try this now. And that's what I love about, like, we should have the freedom to choose, right? Like, we can criticize, but at the end of the day, we're all individuals that have freedom of choice. We can take that risk and risk assessment and say, you know what, I'm willing to take the risk and try this. And that's how we push envelopes. That's how we say, no longer theory. It can be done, right?
Yeah. Well, and by all means, I think we should just kind of state that, like, if it's not like, let's not go experimenting, bringing no calories, because, like, for someone that's not prepared, I think would be like just the general warning. Like, if you're out there, like, have some backup calories with you, because, like, if you have that brain fatigue and you lose out on your, like, brain glycogen, like, it can be a really scary situation. I've been there, and you don't want to be in that situation.
Yeah. And I would also add that Mike's been on this lifestyle diet of kind of, more like high fat, low carb, I guess it's considered, or nutrivore diet, or whatever, kind of more ancestral, paleo, primal blueprint, whatever. There's a whole bunch of different names, bulletproof diet. But he's been on it and tinkering with it for over 3 years. And he's friends with Zach, and he talked to Zach before the attempt too. He and I talked a lot and had strategy around it. And I think what's important here to understand is that he came about this from a more, even though he kind of threw up the plan in the last a month or so, or 2 months, 6 weeks, he decided to do it, that he'd had years of prep for the attempt. You got to also keep in mind that the guys run the Triple Crown twice, right? So he's run 6 200s and a bunch of hundreds. So
that'll change your perspective on distance and what far is.
It really does. That's one we've had talks about that because we used to live in the same valley and train together sometimes. And that's one of the things he said after the 200s. He's like, man, 100s don't seem that long anymore. After doing 6,
well, especially time wise, like an 18-hour versus, 50 or 60 hours.
60
so
hours.
It's a big difference. Well,
Big
Jeff,
difference.
thank you for your time this morning. We really appreciate it. We got our next guest here in the chat room. So anything else you want to add before you sign off this morning?
No, all I can say is Zach, giddy up.
All right. Well,
We'll
thanks,
see you
Jeff.
guys.
Yeah, thanks again.